We are going to have a few separate videos on calendars, but this video is going to go over how to enable a calendar for a user and how to disable a calendar. To create a calendar, you first have to create a user at the location. Very much want to stress, you cannot have a calendar enabled for a user that is set up at the system level. Now, you may need that user to be set up at the system level, as they may need to be a system admin. If that is the case, you will keep that user with their login at the system level, and then you have to create a user at the location level that does not have a login, but it does have a calendar enabled. You can think of it as like a fake user in order to enable a calendar. It's like a placeholder for the calendar. Now, if your user only has access to the location and their user has login access at the location, then you can simply enable a calendar on that same user. But anybody that has a user at the system level cannot have a calendar enabled. You have to create that placeholder user within the location in order to enable a calendar. So what that would look like is if you go to settings, users, create new user, you would select the appropriate provider type. Remember, provider type listed here needs to match your appointment settings because you can only schedule those appointment settings on a provider type that matches. I am not going to enable a login if the user already has a login user at the system level. Their login user is what grants them access. They need access to that system level, so they stay there. So we're not granting a login. They're not actually going to log in with this user. We're just enabling a calendar. Then you would list the name of the provider. After you create the user, make sure to refresh and make sure to create that user under the Providers tab. We have a separate video about the Providers tab, so please reference that video. But keep in mind, if this is a calendar user, especially if you need to bill out under this user, you have to create them as a provider as well. Creating them as a provider under the Providers tab, and we do have a video for this. If a user has a calendar enabled, they will be listed under calendar users, simply meaning there's a calendar enabled for them as compared to an active user down here, meaning they are a user within the location, they just don't have a calendar enabled. Let's talk about the calendar settings here when you enable a calendar. These options are only visible if a calendar is enabled. Let's compare to this user. You can see here, it's asking me to enable a calendar if I want to. You can always enable a calendar after the fact, but calendar settings do not show if there is no calendar enabled. If you would like to set the calendar order, meaning the order of the tabs on your calendar screen, that is this setting. If you would like to change the color of the tabs, you would do so right here. Let's go back to our calendar so we can see. We can see here, this is the color that I just set. If there is no color set, it will default to white. So you can set the tab color on your users if you would like. That would appear like this. You don't have to set a tab color, but it is an option. If a provider leaves your office, you do want to, of course, mark their user as inactive so they cannot get access into your Kyra HD, but you may also want to disable their calendar. To do so, you go to Settings, Users, click on the provider's name. You can go to Calendar Setting and disable calendar, or you can go to Deactivate right here. It's telling us we're about to deactivate this user, and it will prompt me that this provider has appointments scheduled on their calendar. It will give me the option to move the appointments to another provider if there is an equivalent provider listed. So for example, this is a stretch therapist and I don't have another one set up, but let's set one up so you can see me moving the appointments. So I'm setting up another stretch therapist so that I can transfer appointments to that calendar. I do have to make sure that this provider has hours so that I can move appointments to her calendar. So now if I go in and deactivate this stretch therapist, again, I can do so from this tab or deactivate. Now I have the option to transfer all future appointments. It's looking for an equivalent provider. So I'm deactivating a stretch provider. It's looking for another stretch provider here. They have to have matching provider types. If I hit transfer appointments, it will move appointments to that other provider's calendar. So this video just simply goes over how to enable and disable a calendar. We will go into other calendar settings and how to set provider hours and exception hours in other videos.